and welcome. In the wake of recent political events, we are drawn to look at the NSA's role in national security. The National Security Agency, or NSA, has been spying on citizens using webcams, email, security cameras, phone records, internet data, and many other forms of private information. Today we will be hosting a debate between the school-renowned Christopher Emmett Mogul and William Elliott Hagen. So we will begin by having a 1-minute introduction by each speaker, and then we'll continue on to questions. So Christopher, would you like to begin?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Max. So us as Americans, on a daily basis, feel safe in our lives, and we have a right to feel safe. Now, most Americans, as they're going out of their house in the morning, don't think that anything bad is going to happen to them, and chances are they're right. And the reason this is because of the NSA and the government in general. By the government, or the NSA to be specific, watching over us, they are able to potentially catch terrorist attacks before they happen, thus increasing national security and safety, and even saving lives.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mogul. And on to you, Mr. Hagen, for your 1-minute introduction.
Well, citizens of America and first world nations in general have certain rights that they expect to be upheld that are, really essential for their own freedom and for the freedom of the nation as a whole. And one of these freedoms is the freedom to privacy. And the government having access to so much of our personal information, so much of what makes us us, is just simply, unsafe for democracy. It unbalances the trust between the government and its people and disrupts the balance of privacy between the two. If the government's allowed to have such a secret spying program that can take in all of our information without our knowledge, then we should have the same right to the privacy that they do.
Thank you, Mr. Hagen. Very valid points by both speakers. We'll now move on to some questions for both of our speakers, and the first one's for you, Mr. Mogul.
Sir.
Do you feel comforted by the fact that the government can watch your every move?
I do feel comforted, and the reason is because I know that's going to protect me. It's not that they're watching us just to watch us. They are doing it for a specific reason, and that is to catch potential terrorist attacks. And in doing so, they have stopped over 225 terrorist attacks. Now, that's incredible. Let's just think back to 9/11. I mean, yes, there were many separate attacks, but we could think of that as one big attack. That took the lives of over 2,996 Americans, which is absolutely tragic. And I'm not saying that any other attacks will be as large as 9/11, but even, for instance, the Boston bombing. I mean, the actions that the NSA takes are there to prevent these things, and therefore I am comforted in knowing that I am being watched and knowing that potential terrorists are also being watched.
And Mr. Hagen, your rebuttal?
Well, there's really no proof that terrorist attacks are stopped at all. There have been cited at around 50 cases that have been stopped, 50 terrorist attacks that have been stopped by the NSA, and most of these could have either been stopped by, normal security methods, or were not even true at all. So I don't feel like there's any reason that we have to be scared of terrorists as we are, and I don't believe the NSA prevents attacks based on the information that we have on them.
Okay, thank you both. Mr. Hagen, this next question is for you. What power, if any, should the government have to access private records such as phone bills or emails?
Well, obviously, the government will need, phone records or emails at some point, probably, to catch criminals, terrorists or otherwise. And that's why the phone companies themselves and the email providers hang on to this and have access to this just for that purpose. When the NSA takes in all of it and collects it all at once without any court supervision, then there's no way of making sure that the government is actually using this for correct purposes. I mean, they do get warrants from FISA courts, but those are very private and are not, held with any oversight from the public or even the rest of the government.
Thank you, Mr. Hagan. And Mr. Mogul, do you have a rebuttal?
I do, sir. Your argument doesn't make much sense to me because you stated that you agreed that the government needed access to certain records to catch terrorists, as you said. But you said that you were okay with the private companies holding on to this information and then handing it over to the government. Why would you feel more comforted in having a private company hold on to information rather than your own government that is there to protect you? So that's my only real question.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mogul. Moving on. Mr. Mogul, should the government be limited in the information that they can access?
Absolutely not. They should be able to access any certain amount of information as they could want, because once again, the reason this data is being collected is for the public safety. And if you are going to limit the amount of data that the government can access, you are therefore limiting your safety. You are decreasing your safety. So, no, I don't. I think that they should be able to have access to whatever they want.
Thank you, Mr. Mogul. And your rebuttal, Mr. Hagan?
Well, they should be able to have access to whatever a court deems necessary. Because, just simply collecting all this data is, without a warrant, is a direct violation of the Fourth Amendment, which says that, quite clearly that you cannot collect a citizen's private data without their, knowledge or without their consent or without a warrant from a judge. And even if they're not accessing it without a warrant, they still are collecting it and do have access to it. They can access it without a warrant if they just, go for it instead of bothering to check.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hagan. Are you finished? All right, Mr. Mogul. Oh, sorry, Mr. Hagan, this next question is for you. How big a threat do you feel terrorism is to the United States of America?
Well, it really isn't a big one. I mean, the deaths from terrorism each year before 9/11 and after 9/11, even with all these significant, terrorist stopping programs have been introduced, are more or less the same, even as tensions have risen. And I just think it's, there's more of a chance of dying in a car accident each day than there is of dying in a terrorist attack worldwide each year by a wide margin. And we don't have all the safety measures that we could be taking for cars. We don't violate people's rights, in driving cars, so why would we violate it for something much, much, much less dangerous like terrorism? I mean, for God's sakes, people die more from falling down the stairs than from terrorism. These are worldwide figures where terrorism is much more prevalent, like in Middle East countries and in Africa.
Thank you for that heartfelt response. And Topher, do you have a rebuttal?
Yes, I do. It's true. It's a very true statement that terrorism does not kill as many people as other things do, such as car crashes and cancer. However, in many cases, those are unpreventable. The government can't do anything about it. It is, in quote unquote, it's user error. It's the person gets harmed because they did something wrong, or someone did something wrong. Whereas terrorism is a very, very preventable action. And when terrorism does strike, even though it doesn't take as many lives, it's still very, very detrimental. For instance, once again, 9/11 was 4 people away from being 3,000. That's detrimental to our country. Now, our country has millions, so it's not that large of a percentage, but that is still a detrimental disaster, an atrocity that we can avoid, where many other things such as cancer, doctors can do what they can, but it's not something that can be prevented for sure.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mogul. Thank you, Mr. Hagan. Our next question and our final question is for Mr. Mogul. Mr. Mogul, do you feel that the information that the government has access to is actually helping our national security?
Yes, absolutely. I absolutely do. And once again, it's just based on the facts. The NSA has stopped 225 terrorist attacks. And you can't lie, or you can't argue with the numbers. And the last thing I would like to say on that is 225 terrorist attacks is a large number. Now, I'm not saying every single one of those would have been as detrimental as 9/11 was. It could have, maybe not even killed anyone. It could have been a failed attack. But nonetheless, out of 225, it's very possible, in fact, it's likely that one of those would have been just as big as 9/11, if not even bigger. So I think the NSA has done a good job.
Thank you, Mr. Mogul.
Well, as I've said before, there's really no proof that 225 is a substantiated number. It's just a claim thrown out there by a former NSA director. And the current NSA director actually has pegged the number more at 50, and only 2 of those have been released to the public, both of which, in fact, have been debunked. There's just so many other ways, like traditional police forces or the FBI, to stop these attacks, and they've been successful in many times over.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hagan, and thank you, Mr. Mogul. And Mr. Hagan, your closing statement, please.
Well, for me, the NSA is a clear violation of both our Constitution's 4th Amendment and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights' 12th Amendment, both which state that, national security does not have priority over a basic fundamental right like privacy. The NSA really doesn't prevent attacks, and it weakens the trust between us and our government, which is essential for a functioning society. If any member of the government were to take advantage of the information that they have available through the NSA, the effects would be disastrous and would, cause all faith in government to be lost, even more than it already is. And we can't allow that to happen.
Thank you, Mr. Hagan. All right, and Mr. Mogul, your closing statement, please.
Okay, yes, thank you. So, once again, I would just like to reiterate that every person, American and non-American, has a right to feel safe and to be safe. And it is the government's responsibility to ensure that they have safety. And the NSA, which stands for National Security Agency, is there to ensure that we are safe. They're taking every single precaution and every single action that they can to ensure that we as a country are safe and that no one is harmed from terrorism or any threats in general, any national security threats. If they feel that it is important to do a certain action, such as spy on us, then I feel as if that's a legitimate enough reason to let them do it if they feel it's necessary. And let's not forget that they've stopped over 225 terrorist attacks. That's an incredibly big number. And any one of those could have been just as big or even bigger than 9/11, which is an absolute atrocity. So, it's important that we are as safe as possible, and we can be as safe as possible by taking all the precautions, including the NSA surveilling us.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Mogul.
Thank you.
We are now going to wrap up our debate. I hope that you guys have all learned something about our national security and have formed a knowledgeable opinion on our issue.